Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel for the read along of the Fantasy Adventure A Book of Creation by Gregory James Gardner Jr. If you've been following along, thank you for following this far. To recap, we went through chapter 5 last time where Mathis was recounting a story to Talia about something that happened to Ganon, where he came across a girl in the forest and tried to make sure she was safe for the night, and the girl ended up getting too close to Ganon's power armor called Dark Star. Dark Star ended up killing the girl, and Ganon he's traumatized from it. So, moving on to chapter 7, The Road to Ninnersog. The year is 1065 by the nocturnal calendar. Talia spun around in shock with a flash. It ate her? She looked at Mathis, aghast in the light of the autumn that shone from behind him, far off in the distant southeast. A patchwork of clouds drifted along the cliff face far below them, almost lost against the tundra landscape beneath, as the silver glow of Azurlun infused the clouds with luminescence. The sky to the south remained as pitch black as ever, but the hues of the sky above them had started to turn an ever so subtle shade of deep dark purple. That's the way I understand it, Mathis answered. There may be some things lost in the translation. Now keep going. We're almost to the summit of the rim. His breath was more labored than necessary in feigned exhaustion. Wow, Talia said to herself as she turned back to her path and continued onward and upward. And this Dark Star, it is alive? Not exactly. I don't quite know how to answer that. Talia just nodded. So what happened to Ganon? Well, Mathis half-heartedly laughed. If you'll let me finish the story, he changed form. Again? Mathis nodded. Ganon seemed to go mad with insanity as he cursed his existence. He felt solely responsible for the death of Aaron, the death of innocence, so to speak. When his wailing subsided, left with no energy, Ganon collapsed to the ground. There he lay, not moving for an unwritten amount of time, until at last something altogether different slithered out of his corpse. I do not understand, she said. To be quite honest, neither do I. And the writing says he's never been seen again, though it's perfectly clear that he's still alive. How do you know? Mathis thought of how to answer her. The writing continued to refer to him, but in a different way. Saharu. Saharu? Talia thought about the word. It meant diminished. That is unfortunate and sad. Her emotions were quickly swept away to be replaced with sheer astonishment as they crested the summit of the rim. The world exploded into view as the craterus rolled out before them. To the east stretched the crown, a series of 3 craters, one massive and 2 smaller inner craters. All of them were connected by their rims in the southern region, mounted by the Hersog Karol, where they all joined. The mountain ranges formed by those connections were named the Aga, Muru Aga, and Mara Aga. The craters spilled outward and downward before them, but nothing could be seen of them as the vast distance sat covered in whole by clouds and thick fog. To the west, the great crater sprawled out as its rim vanished beyond sight. The southwestern range of mountains had been named Peridon's Scar and played prominently in the Jotun's construction, but that is another story entirely. Between the 2 ranges of Muru Aga and Peridon's Scar sat Melamu, an open range of foothills that gave way to sparsely forested areas. The patches thickened together to create one forest as the 2 ranges closed in on the overgrown pass to the north. As the sky traveled north, the deep purples of the southern twilight blended into shades of blue that mixed into greens, and then into the yellows and golden hues of a dreamy sunrise that hung ever-present on the jagged horizon. It had been the most beautiful sight that Talia had taken in for such a long time, and she looked out at all she could to soak it up. She could see that where the slopes of the crater descended into Melamu to meet each other in the distance, faint rays of light broke through the pass to line the canopy with an ethereal golden light. A smile eased its way onto her face. Absolutely beautiful, she said to herself. She turned to Mathis. She was not one to be too swept away by things. Where are we to descend from here? He peered over the rim as it swept its way north. About half a day's journey from here is the Hersog Golvan, and off the beaten path we'll find a cave. Into the cave? She asked, resolute. Into the cave, he said in kind. With the dark of the south behind them and the gleaming north ahead, the two friends traveled onward along the rim. Ever so often, they would catch glimpse of a flock of birds soaring on the winds that kept pace with them. From time to time, the birds would drop down to the ground ahead of them and then take flight just before their arrival. The birds acted as though they were guides along the way, though as the Hersog began to rise higher and higher, the birds would fly off farther and farther away. They skimmed the tops of the clouds far down below, and Taya watched them drift off into the wind. Her attention shifted from the birds to below the birds as something broke the surface of the clouds. There was only the distant sound of them calling on the wind as a silent but massive worm reached up from the cover of the mists, opened its maw, and swallowed them before relaxing to drop out of sight. Taya's jaw dropped. Was that an actual Leviathan? Sure was, but he was more focused on the task. It came time to veer onto the descending cliffside to the inner rim, so Mathis walked ahead of Taya on the path. Watch your step. To Taya, it seemed like the next blind turn would surely be the death of them. Mathis turned back and firmly gripped Taya by the forearm. Without a word, he took them off the ledge. After a squeak of quick fright, Taya silenced herself and caught her breath as she came to a solid step at a 90-degree angle to the path she was just standing on. Turning to look over her shoulder, she was astonished to be looking right up at the sky. Talia gained her senses enough to look ahead toward Mathis when she watched him take another 90-degree step. Standing upright once more, the way it should be, he tugged on her arm to follow along and also held her steady as she did so. He did not let her go either, as the two of them began to take a twisting, turning, and altogether vortexuous descent into the rocky cave. After only a few minutes, Taya had lost all sense of which way was considered up, and so too had her balance, soon followed by her stomach. Mathis, I think I'm going to be sick. Hold your stomach, maiden. There's no telling where that'll end up, but it was too late. Mathis flinched as the mass of stuff hurled by his shoulder and down the corkscrewing tunnel. It, too, weaved in all directions as it flowed down through the air, never touching a sidewall as it went. Both just watched in growing curiosity. I feel better now. She wiped her mouth with one hand and with the other lightly pushed Mathis ahead. Thankfully, not long had passed before the tunnel began to even out and things started to settle. Soon it was clear that whatever they had just been through, it had ended, and they were certainly standing upright once again. Though they were not traveling level or moving deeper, to Taya it seemed as though they were ascending, and her suspicions were settled when Mathis spoke. All right, I hope you save some energy because it's nothing but up from here. His eyes scaled the fissured tunnel, up, and up some more. Let's catch our breath for a bit. She sat on a waist-high rock. Agreed. You can tell me what that tunnel back there was all about. I thought you wanted to catch your breath, he laughed. I've seen some strange places, but nothing like that. She looked back down the dark and foreboding tunnel. What is it? That is a story related to the Cataclysm, when there was an intervention made to save our world from annihilation. But it's also something that doesn't make any sense to me, so I can't even begin to wonder how it's done. Mathis nodded to have Taya look ahead, up the tunnel. It looks steep, but isn't. We're going slightly downhill at the moment, so the path ahead will just level us back out by the end. But from there, he thought for a moment, from there we'll need some serious stamina. He looked back to Taya. About ready, maiden? Better now than ever. She hoisted herself up.